Hi everyone, I hope you've enjoyed the Easter weekend and I want to welcome you to this week's episode. I know last week I did not post. I really did have a lot of work, so I could not make time to record, and I know generally I need to actually get going on the recording in advance. Sometimes it's just very hard because sometimes I even have an idea of how I want to record the content and I change it, and yeah, sometimes I just try to not make the process very complicated. So I've decided to grant myself grace and just record when I can. And anyway, this is this week's video. Welcome. If you're new here, thank you for subscribing and I hope you'll enjoy the content today. Last time we talked more about setting up online e-commerce platforms versus having your own website, and before that we talked about pop-up markets. This week's video is more about pop-up shops and having your own physical shop. I want to explain a bit more about why I would encourage you to start with a pop-up model and basically how it works, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritties of what you need in slide form. So welcome. So as we begin, I would like to just point out one thing. I did a video last year, which I will link in the description, about what you need in terms of what the government requires from you when you're opening a physical shop. The truth is that there are very many requirements our government does require, especially if you have people working for you. Even if you don't have people working for you, there's still a lot of requirements, and maybe some things have even been updated because almost every year they come up with something new. But I will link it because there's no point of me making this video longer by repeating everything that I put in that video. Another thing is I wanted to talk about having being in a pop-up shop, which is usually temporary. It could be temporary in terms of the fact that you're only there for a few months, or it could be that you're sharing a shop with other brands, so it's a multi-brand shop. And then having your own store. I would definitely encourage someone who's starting out in a physical shop, assuming that you've been doing pop-up markets and you've been selling online, because I think that despite having a physical shop, those two elements of your business should not stop, because it's still part of your marketing and it's still also more revenue streams for you to be able to sell things. So the thing about pop-up shops is that, first of all, it's a good way to test if the location you're considering is a good location because you're there for a temporary basis, or if you're sharing with other people, then maybe the expenses aren't as high because maybe the person who has the contract with the premise, or if the premise themselves are the ones who are subletting, you'll find that it cushions you with a lot of all these expenses. A lot of fashion brands here in Kenya start like that, especially ready-to-wear brands. Because the truth is, if you commit, a lot of these spaces, very good spaces, require you to commit for long periods of time. Some of their leases could be even 2 years, and maybe you pay for 2 years and it might not be an ideal location for you, and you've committed for 2 years and it could ruin your business. So a pop-up is a good way to go, even if it's not the specific location that you're planning to set up shop in. It could be somewhere in the area and you would know if it's the ideal location for you. So I would definitely suggest that you start with a pop-up and figure out if it's the right space for you before you go committing into a lease that takes a long period of time. I am personally talking from experience of doing both, and I have noted that pop-up gives me options. Because it's not a long-term commitment, and if it's not working, I can always try and do another pop-up. But also it's important to give it a long enough time so that you can actually really see if it's really working. Maybe you haven't marketed well enough, or you just need to change how you market your brand. So it's very important to have that in mind. So the thing about committing now to your own physical store, there is advice I once heard from a lady who is very successful here with fashion retail. She owns the brand Vivo, and she said that when she opened her first store, she made sure that at least the expenses, rent, salaries, licenses, everything was covered for a year, so that she could really have the time to market and push sales for that year to see if it's really worth continuing with the brand. So my advice would definitely be just save up for a year's worth of expenses so that you can actually give your brand a fighting chance. So it's not that you're not selling anything, you still have your pop-up markets, you still have your online platforms, but a physical location is really a huge commitment. Most of the fashion malls here, or most of the malls, they're not fashion malls, but most of the malls here in Kenya require tax compliance. They require at least 6 months rent, and they give you long-term leases, and they ask for bank statements because they want to ensure that you actually have the money to pay. So it's a huge commitment, and it's just important to have all that aligned before you commit to a permanent shop. So I hope this has been helpful, and I am just going to get into basically what you need for both, whether you're doing temporary or permanent. These are just things you need for a physical location, and I hope that this will be helpful, and I will see you at the end.
So we're going to look at the planning and implementation of a whole process from setup to closing. In case you need to close, I decided to just add that at the end of your shop, whether it's temporary or permanent. A lot of these points are good for all of them. So we're going to start with having clear objective. What are you trying to achieve with your shop? So we're going to start with a budget, which plays a huge factor in the rest of your plans because it's what you can afford to do. You will need to be very clear about how much you want to spend and how much you want to get back. And that will help you be able to know how much you're willing to spend to achieve those goals. Next, we look at the location. Of course, you're in a country, probably even in a city or some kind of neighborhood. You need to figure out, do you need a place with a high amount of foot traffic, or is your brand so well established you do not really need foot traffic? Maybe you need a quiet place. Where is your audience ideally going to be? What kind of person are they? Where do they shop? This is all going to play factor into your location. Then you look at your utilities. Do you need Wi-Fi? Do you need a kitchen space? Do you have a toilet? What kind of utilities do you have? Do you need kind of electricity? Is it stable electricity, especially in Kenya where we get blackouts often? Water, is there access to water? Is it a shared space that you're going to have some parts, or is it going to be fully yours? So all this will also determine how much you'll pay for a space. Storage is a no-brainer for most fashion brands because most of the time, whether you are doing made to measure or ready to wear, you need space to put fabrics, to put extra clothes, to just store your bags, to store various things. So storage is definitely something you also need to consider if you're going to be storing things in your shop. Maybe you'll store it in another location, but ideally if it's in your shop, it's even better and easier. You will need definitely to think about the interior design of the whole space, how it makes a customer feel when they're shopping inside, how people navigate through it, how it looks inside, if it's going to be in line with your brand identity. So that is another thing you need to think about. Since I am assuming you're still going on with your e-commerce platform, you need to synchronize your digital and offline sales. So make sure you have a system that synchronizes both of those sales so that you do not end up having issues with your online customers because you sold something physically and it wasn't updated online. So just make sure all that is in place. Think about how you're going to promote things to make people more aware of where you are, of how to get to your location, maps, if you need to put maps, if you need to put a pin, if you need to put direction, if you put even a landmark that people can be able to figure out to know where you are exactly. And also, you really need to think about how you measure your success. Is your success that you got more customers? Is your success the number of sales? Is your success more traffic on your online sales, even more than your physical sales? There are so many factors to consider. Maybe your physical shop is more of a place where people come and pick up things, but they bought things online. You never know. So it's always important to take note of what you see as your success. So these are just the preparation before you actually set up the shop, because remember, you're working on a budget and you're working on how you're going to implement all these things. Getting started, setting up your shop. So one of the things you need to really be aware of is the venue you've picked. What's going on there? Are there construction going on? Is it all clear? Are there some things they need to work on? Are they making pavements? Even if the space itself is not under construction, are there developments coming around that area? You have to have a very clear picture in mind of what your customer experience is going to be like, and even what it's going to be like for you to access your own premise. So have that clear picture in mind. So a lot of landlords are retail experts, so there's a way they've designed the space. Hopefully where you've picked that they are people who think about their tenants getting customer and flow. So talk to them specifically about where your shop should be and the specific location that will bring you more sales and that will make sense even for their design of the mall or the space you are going to rent. So ensure that you liaise with the landlord and get the best space for your shop. As you're doing all that, ensure that all your plans are in line with your agreement with your landlord and the requirements they expect you to follow, because you also don't want to do too many changes to the space that you can't be able to justify later. So ensure you do that. Getting insurance at this point is a no-brainer, because if anything happens, you'll be covered. So getting insurance is a no-brainer, but doesn't necessarily mean everybody does it. It really just helps cover you in case of any incidences. Also, of course, you have to get your permits and your licenses from a government official, which can be annoying, but it's very necessary if you want to just be able to operate without any drama. Also, think about how you'd like your window display to look like, because that is basically a vision of what people will expect in your shop. So ensure that you really work on the display, that it really reflects your brand identity very, very well, and that it will draw people to come in, even if it's out of curiosity, to check it out. It's a good way to sell your brand identity. Ensure that you purchase or hire whatever you need to make your shop a success. You can hire temporarily if you can't afford to buy it. Your fixtures, your furniture, your lights, your decorations, just make sure it looks top notch. Some people even partner with furniture designers and interior designers who also want to showcase their work to basically beautify the shop so that it's a win-win situation. Also, when you're hiring your staff, ensure that they are in line with your brand identity, they understand what they're supposed to do, and they are friendly, and of course they have all the best customer service. And then of course you start marketing your brand. Don't forget that you are still doing online sales and you're also doing your pop-ups, and you can continue telling people, oh, if you come to the shop you get a discount, and just give offers when you're doing all those other methods so that people can come to your store, because you also need to see if it's worth keeping a physical store. Also, lastly, of course, you have to think about how payments are made. Remember, now when you have staff, you would be concerned about how money is being collected and security even of the premise and all that. So how you take your payments is very, very important, because if you take cash and it's a lot of cash, do you need to get an armored car to come and pick the money, or do you want to make it easy and everything is electronic? So just make sure you have all that in mind as well. Now that you are ready to open, there are things you need to think about, like the policies of your shop. I know it doesn't sound like it's something people think about, but there are so many things that can happen in a shop that you need to think about. Like, a very simple one is, are customers allowed to use your restrooms? Maybe they're not allowed to use your restrooms and they have to use the restrooms maybe of the mall that you're renting or anything like that. What if someone has pets? Are they allowed to come with their pets into the shop? Is it safe? Even there are some shops that don't even allow kids running around it because they spoil things and all that. So basically also think about customer experience. If a customer falls sick, what is the procedure? Do you call an ambulance? Do you have a space for them to sit? And so many things you need to think about. Then another thing you could also think about is how you're drawing visitors in, especially for your day, because that's part of your planning and your marketing. Ensure that there's something that is attracting people to come into your shop, apart from your window display, of course, something that will draw them in. Maybe you could do a giveaway, because that's another way. You could do a giveaway and have an offer for the day, just so that people can even just come and check out your shop, or have an event or launch party or grand opening that will draw people into your shop, because that is a very, very good way to attract people to come at least and check out. They'll come back for sure if they really like what they see. Keep in touch with your landlord always make sure you keep your engagement with your landlord very well, because they ideally should also work with you to draw in people to the premise. And also test every single system you set up and ensure that it's working very, very well, from your employees to your payment solutions to your packaging to your displays to how the shop looks and feels and everything like that. Ensure you have all that sorted out so that you do not have any issues. Now we move on to operations. That's a day-to-day operation. So of course a no-brainer is opening hours, shopping hours. Opening hours could be for your staff, shopping hours could be for the people who come to shop in your shop, because the truth is you could open and maybe in the morning you deal a lot with online sales, so it's not necessarily, the physical shop may not be necessarily open to the public at that time. So those two are actually very, very different. Of course, you have to think about your employee policies, because of course, apart from what the government requires you to do, you have to think about how you engage with your employees, how motivated they are. Basically ensure that the customers are served well, because if your employee is happy, of course your customer will be happy. Ensure that your maintenance and cleaning of the shop is top notch, whether you're hiring a cleaning service or your employees are the ones who need to care for the shop. You have to have technical support on hand, because anything happens, a light bulb might not be working or the water is not running or anything like that. Technical support is very important. Some things you could do yourself, some things the landlord is supposed to provide for you, and some things maybe it's additional technical support you need because of the nature of your business. Like for fashion, in case you decided to do alterations in the shop, maybe you need someone who comes to check your machine and do all sorts of technical support. So just always make sure all those things are on hand. Lastly, of course, customer engagement. How you are engaging with your customers is important. I guess through emails you can tell them about offers and sales and things like that. You could invite them for special events. You could give them discounts if they are loyal. You could have a loyalty program. You could have giveaways. You always have to try and keep the customers coming and coming, so that it keeps your shop engaged. Evaluation and analysis. So generally determine what you consider success. Ensure that you're measuring your performance against your objectives and any benchmarks you created to see that you are happy with your success. It could be your social media engagement increases. Maybe people are giving reviews about how great it is to shop at your shop, or the impact your shop is having or your brand is having on your customers. how many people are sharing, how many people are following, how many sales you're getting, how many new customers you're getting, how many people are signing up maybe to your newsletter so they can be aware of any offers you have. There are very many ways to determine the success. So you determine what you think the success is, because it's not just about the physical shop, it's also about your other ways of selling. Maybe you're wasting so much time on this side and this other side is doing better, so it's always good to know. Then you need to celebrate all your successes and your milestones, because they basically will encourage you to keep going, and you can also decide to use that as a way to celebrate with your customers. Maybe you use your milestones and celebrations as time to give offers to your customers, just to thank them for helping you reach the milestones. So basically, yes, reward your customers. Always make them feel treasured and that you value them. And also check the things you would do again. That's also a very good way of checking a matrix. The things that are really, really working are the things you do again. And also learn from the mistakes. There are always things that go wrong when you are running a shop. It's important to know what is working and what is not working, so that you do not repeat them, and you can also figure out solutions around all those issues. Closing down is usually unfortunate, but sometimes it does happen, and closing down doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of your brand or your business. It could just mean that you need to change a few things, or maybe having a physical shop was not working for your brand. So talk to your employees, of course, at first, because they will be the most affected directly in terms of their livelihood. So talk to them. If possible, you are working with employees that you already have, maybe on your online department or other things you already do. You might not have to fire them, just maybe to reevaluate how they're working for you, or their job descriptions. You can take down and disassemble your displays, your furniture, your banners, your signs, your furniture, or any other customized thing that you added to the shop. You need to clean up the store, return the keys to the landlord, and reevaluate your steps and see what worked, what didn't work. If you need more time, if you need a new location and all that. So it's getting a physical shop is definitely a lot of trial and error, and it's not just something that is easy to determine the first to go. If it does work out that way, it's awesome. If it doesn't, it can be very, very difficult, but it's also a learning curve and part of running your business.
So that's the end of this series. I hope you have gotten a few good tips on selling in pop-up or craft markets, online and in a physical location, on a more permanent basis, let's just say, or long-term basis. So I know I haven't touched on selling on virtual reality like metaverse and things like that, but hey, I am sharing from personal experience and things that you could actually do. So also don't forget that another aspect of having physical locations is if you offer ready-to-wear or made-to-measure clothes. A lot of people in Kenya expect made-to-measure when you open a physical store, unless you completely just make sure it's just a shop attendant and your clothes there. But Kenyans are used to fashion brands doing made-to-measure, which is generally good for the environment, but also not everybody is a made-to-measure brand. There are some people who do offer things like alterations. If you buy something, they can alter it in your shop. I think it's a good service to have because of just the diverse shapes and sizes we have in this country. But generally, most ready-to-wear shops will even refer you to somebody else. But anyway, I hope this has been insightful. There will be a completely different series for the rest of the month, and I'm going to also talk about fashion revolution, which might be something that a lot of you have not heard of, and I'm just going to touch on. I'm just going to explain what it's all about. You may have heard of it, you may not even understand why it's there every year, but I think it's important to be informed because it's basically also fighting for the rights of people who work in the fashion industry and ensuring that people are treated fairly and paid well as well as also thinking about our environmental impact as a fashion industry. So I hope you will stay tuned this month and enjoy the rest of your week. Bye.